everyone, and welcome to another episode of Divi Nation. Divi Nation is a podcast and YouTube show by Elegant Themes, a proud leader in the premium WordPress theme and plugin market. The goal of Divi Nation is really simple. We want to provide you with the knowledge, insights, and supportive community that you need to be successful with WordPress and Divi. I'm your host, Nathan B. Weller, and as your host, it's my job to facilitate that success by having various guests from Divi and the wider WordPress community onto the show to share their stories and experiences with you. In this episode, I'll be sitting down with Amber Weinberg, a freelance WordPress front-end developer living and working out of Nashville, Tennessee. But wait a second, I can hear some of you saying, didn't you announce on Facebook that you would be interviewing Josh Pollock about the WP REST API and the future of WordPress this week? Yes, I did in fact say that, and we did sit down and record an episode this week, but unfortunately, I messed it up. I experienced some technical difficulties on my end that resulted in, let's just say, unusable audio. Needless to say, I'm really bummed out, but the good news is that most of Josh's audio is actually good. So if it's possible, I'd still like to salvage some of the interview for some short videos to put up on our YouTube channel, sort of like bonus content. I'll just have to see what happens in the editing room when I have some time to really tinker with that. I'm mentioning all of this because Josh is an awesome guy, and I feel really bad because this is actually the second time that we've sat down for an interview where something audio related went wrong. The first time was down at WordCamp Miami, where people moving equipment into the room that we were in, that we were trying to record in, made so much noise that it completely ruined our recording. And then, of course, the second time was here just over Skype, and it was a setting error on my part, and the audio just wasn't usable. So it's kind of crazy. It feels almost like the WordPress gods don't want that interview to happen or something, but I don't accept that. Which is why I'd like to encourage anyone interested in the WordPress REST API to go to his website. That's joshpollock.net. That's Pollock for anyone who doesn't know how to spell Pollock. joshpollock.net, and take a look around. He's written a bunch of great articles on the WP REST API and a lot of other cool topics. He's also doing some cool stuff in the WordPress plugin space with his company WP Caldera. That's his form building plugin. And he's also got another one called Ingot, which is a split testing plugin. And then he's got a free version of that available in the official WordPress plugin repository called Nugget. If any of that sounds like it's your thing, that you'd be interested in it, I encourage you to check it out and say hi to Josh from the Divi Nation podcast in the comment section. In his comment section. Now back to the guest that we are actually having on today's show, Amber Weinberg. So chances are you probably haven't heard of her. You don't know who that is. And the reason for that is because Amber has largely worked as a front-end developer for WordPress since 2008 behind the scenes, often attached to one or more agencies at a time. And it's that particular aspect of her career that really interested me and wanted to talk about on today's show. So in the past on this podcast, we've talked a lot about ways that people can find a niche and succeed when building websites with WordPress and Divi. Many of our past guests have promoted a business model of offering maintenance services as a means of ensuring steady recurring income. What we haven't had anyone do on the podcast until now is say, okay, forget maintenance, forget dealing with clients by and large, forget wearing a million hats as a startup or as a solo business person. There's a way to keep the freedom of a freelancer, still get good rates, and also enjoy the stability and hyper specialization of working at an agency. And the way that you do that is you freelance for one or more agencies at a time. So this is the model that Amber has used in her own career, and she thinks it's something that others can replicate. By all accounts, it looks to be working really well for her. And when we talked about it, it seemed like something that others could benefit from. So when we caught up earlier this week, just the other day, to chat, we really dove into this model of freelancing in detail and talked about why it works for her and how it can be replicated by others. Here's our conversation. Amber, welcome to Divi Nation.
Hello.
So glad that we could have you on. I know we've been trying to connect for a while now. How's your day so far?
It's really good. It's a gorgeous day here in Tennessee, but very windy. So
Yeah. I was looking up some stuff on your website earlier to get ready, and I saw that you had a tweet on your website that said you hadn't got much sleep, so you're loading up on coffee for the interview.
Yes, I'm running on about 3 hours of sleep and probably 20 cups of coffee. So I might start bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, I just did my daily tankard of coffee as well. One of the questions I always like to ask people right off the bat, just because I feel like it tells you so much about them as a person and as a freelancer, is sort of just like, what is your typical day? And I'm assuming your typical day is not consist of running on 3 hours of sleep. But what is your typical workday like?
Sure. I actually like a lot of sleep. I tend to get like 10 to 12 hours of sleep. So I don't wake up
Oh,
till like
nice.
11 p.m. or excuse me,
That's one of
11 a.m. Um, so basically I wake up, I have to take my dogs for a walk, get breakfast, and I like to immediately sit down at my computer, and work for about 3 hours before I, attend to getting a shower and out of my pajamas.
That's
So
awesome.
basically, I get to emails first, just so I get them out of the way, and then I'll hit my main project. Usually, I'm working on like 2 to 3 projects at the same time. So
Hmm.
I like to schedule them in 2 hour blocks because I get kind of bored easily. And if
Yeah,
I'm coding the same thing for longer than 2 hours, I tend to start, messing around on Twitter or Pocket or
sure.
something.
So one thing I always like to ask people on the show is just kind of tell us your WordPress story. When did you get involved in WordPress? When did you discover it? When did you start working on it? And how did that turn into you basically building websites for a living?
Well, I worked at an agency for about a year and didn't really do anything with WordPress much beyond updating one or two like strictly blog WordPress sites. So it wasn't until I started
Hmm.
freelancing about 6 years ago that I really got into WordPress. And I'm not exactly sure how that happened. I think I kind of just stumbled in on it. I had a client who was like, "Hey, I have this WordPress site. I need you to do a couple updates." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." Um, I was just like, I'll just jump right in. I have no idea how to code in WordPress or really, what it's about, but I kind of jumped in with 2 feet and fell in love with it. Um, I started out, before it became a really strong CMS. And these days I do a lot of custom theming, a lot of work with advanced custom fields. And really, that's pretty much all I work in these days. And I really love it.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about kind of the clients that you tend to take on and what a typical project
Mhm.
kind of looks like for
I
you.
mostly work with all agencies and freelancers. I don't really work with like
Okay.
the normal small business client. And I don't work with pre-made templates or themes. So I do
Okay.
100% custom work. Basically, I have like
Oh,
a
nice.
blank starter theme called Super Hijinxified that's on my website. If viewers want to check it out, and it's just kind of the basic functions, kind of the basic HTML. It's really a blank starter theme, and allows
Okay.
me to get started really quickly. Everything I do is just, I love hand coding. I don't do any process or CSS. So I like to make sure things are 100% custom for the client, semantic and accessible, and things like that.
Sure. Uh, so going back to some of your first projects, what were some of the early lessons that you learned as a freelancer? You said you were working for an agency and then you became a
Yes,
freelancer.
yes.
That's correct. And so when you broke out on your own and you decided this is kind of what I'm going to do with my career, what were some of the first really big lessons that you kind of ran up against and had to learn?
Freelancing wise or WordPress wise?
Both, I guess. I mean, like freelancing as a WordPress designer or developer.
I learned quickly that I needed to specialize. There's way too many things that come out, almost every week. There's way too much to learn. Originally, I started out by doing everything: design, front end development, back end development, SEO, content, and I got burnt out really quickly. And I also realized that I just really enjoyed the front end part of things. I do a bit of back end work, custom functions and things like that in WordPress, but I don't do any like hardcore database type back end work. I mainly just stay with JavaScript, CSS, HTML, that kind of stuff.
Oh, nice. And, well, you've obviously come a long way since your first couple projects. I noticed that you had some pretty cool clients. I really like the fact that you worked for Audible, or you did a project with Audible. It's listed on your website. They're one of my favorite apps. I use them like all the time. Can you talk about what landing, a client like that is like, and maybe even describe that project a little bit?
For them, I did their original mobile site, which was actually an M.dot site. So it used to be, I think they have a version of it still, but it's quite a bit different from when I worked on it. I think it's mobile.audible.com. And it was really the first jump into mobile for me. Up until then, I hadn't really done very much with responsive design. I certainly hadn't done anything with like a full mobile standalone site versus, responsive, one site. So that was really a fun project. And I got really lucky. Basically, they found me and they sent me an email through my website and was like, hey, we love your work. We've got this project. Are you interested? And I was like, hell yes.
Wow. Yeah. How did that happen? I mean, how'd they find you?
Apparently I have very good SEO for my website.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about that later on is, I found you by just literally searching. I think I searched like WordPress web developer, and like you were one of the first results. I was like, wow, so this person clearly has their SEO figured out, but let's see what their work looks like. And as I looked at your work and the services you provide, I thought, this is someone who's clearly, got some experience. You've been in the game for a while. You're doing work with big clients. And I wanted to talk more with you about it. So here we are. But yeah, clearly you've got your SEO figured out. Is that something that you did accidentally? I mean, or did you really have a strategy for that?
Sort of both. My website design is actually like 3 or 4 years old. I'm in the process of redesigning it right now. But basically I installed all-in-one SEO and just did kind of the basics, custom titles and keywords and made sure my code was super semantic. I had the proper headings. And I think it was just all of the blogging, because originally I started out blogging like once a day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot of blogging.
Nowadays I do it like once every month or so.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I'm interested in what you actually blogged about, because to rank for, that term or the terms that will get you clients is very different than ranking for terms that your peers might search for. So a lot of people, when they blog about what they do, they basically blog like, here's something I learned and here's how I do it, which is great, but that might not necessarily be the content that your clients need to see in order to know that they want to hire you. So for instance, like a designer might say like, here's this cool design thing I learned, and other designers would get a lot out of it, but it might not draw a client to them. What kind of blogging did you do that drew clients to you? Well, I kind of do
a mix. I do a mix of, hey, this is what I've learned. Here's, a cool tutorial. I did a mix of, business. So this is how to be a great freelancer and how to attract clients. And I've actually done relatively few, client-specific post as far as, why design is good for your business. Because I target agencies and other freelancers. So when I write a here's what I've learned post, that actually helps them as well as, fellow developers or whatnot.
Cool. Well, one of the things I want to focus in on, we're already kind of talking about it, but just to kind of put a name to it, is just strategies that freelancers can use to really thrive as a freelancer. And we're talking about blogging. We've talked about your daily routine a little bit. I was wondering if we could just kind of go through a bit of a bullet pointed list and hit a couple other things up. And you mentioned agencies and freelancers that you've worked with. And I noticed that on your site as well. I was interested to know if do you intentionally team up with agencies to get work that they're working on, or do you just happen to work with them, by chance? What is that relationship like, and why do you choose to be a freelancer for an agency and not, a member of that agency?
Sure. I intentionally target agencies just because I love that I don't have to educate them. They can come to my website, they can look at my code examples, and they can say, okay, I see why she charges, double what somebody else might charge or half of what another person might charge. And I love that. I really love just being in the code. I don't necessarily like having to hold the client's hand and walk them through the process and things like that. So in some ways, it's kind of a laziness because I don't have to do all that work. I don't have to project manage and I don't have to go back and forth and things like that. And it's just really what I love. I love it when a client comes to me, they have these designs and they're like, can you make this work? And it's a challenge for me. And, working with a bunch of different agencies, not only can I pick and choose who I work with and what I work on, I get different challenges, because when you work at an agency, you work constantly with one or two other designers. And I've also found, to be 100% honest, Nashville is a rising cost city. They used to be really cheap to, living expenses wise, but I don't think the pay has really caught up. So if I were to get a full-time job here, I would be making a third of what I make now.
So that's interesting. So I like this idea, this kind of theme that's rising of, kind of targeting agencies to save yourself some of the client side work while getting to focus on your strengths, which I think is really smart, yet maintaining a freelance position so that you can keep your rate where you like it. I think that's a really cool strategy. I want to talk more about it. How do you target agencies, for one? Like, what does that actually mean? Like, what's the process of you going, that looks like an agency I could work with, or is it come about some other way?
It comes about in multiple ways. I mean, the first and biggest way is that my website itself is targeted to agencies and other freelancers. I specifically say, this is who I work with. These are the type of projects I take on. And this is who I don't work with. I don't do design work. I don't take on regular clients, which I do sometimes if I'm really interested in the project. Because, technically Audible wasn't a design agency. They're a big company, but I was super interested because I love their app. So I do take it on a case-by-case basis, but my website is super targeted to agencies. I also, when I'm looking around job boards and things like that, I make sure I'm applying only for an agency and not necessarily a, regular client. And really that's what it is. It's once you kind of get the ball rolling, you don't have to look for a lot of work. It kind of comes to you. And once you're known as somebody who works with agencies, when it's time,
word kind of get around because they're all talking to each other.
And you wouldn't think, I used to not get a lot of referrals, but nowadays I will have agencies will refer me to, other agencies because they know somebody in that agency or, such and such.
Okay. Any sort of best practices you want to pass on to people who might also want to build these relationships with agencies? Like, what kind of a freelancer, in your experience, do agencies like to work with? What makes a good partnership from their perspective?
I get a lot of complaints from agencies about freelancers who drop off the map. They don't meet their deadlines. They're terrible at communications. And I've kind of had the same experience when I've tried to contract out. When I'm looking for designers to work with or, back-end developers, or even if I have extra work for a front-end developer. And that's kind of like the number one key. I mean, not even the quality of your work. The quality of your work could be, phenomenal. But if you don't meet those deadlines, if you don't communicate to the client what's going on, you'll never get work.
That's actually something that I went to a WordCamp in Miami. It's been a couple weeks ago now, but one of the things that kept coming up time and time again from people from agency heads who were talking was was the importance of soft skills in the people that they hire. The idea that, you can teach someone a vast number of technical skills, but you can't often teach people soft skills that get developed over many years. Have you found that to be true? Like your ability to deal with clients, or your ability just to deal with the in-house team there, being almost as important as your technical abilities?
And it doesn't even require a lot of work, really. I mean, I only check my email once or twice a day, so I'm not even constantly in contact with a client. But it's the fact of I answer their email within 24 hours, if not sooner. I say thank you, and I break some business rules where they always say don't use emoticons and smiley faces. I do that, and people like that because they realize they're working with somebody real. They're not working with a robot churning out code. And and it's really amazing to me when people are like, oh, I've been through 3 freelancers, and you think, oh, that's a red flag, maybe they're a terrible client, but then you work with them and they're a fantastic client, and you realize that they just had terrible freelancers. You always see clients from hell type articles, but you never see freelancers from hell.
Right. Yeah. And maybe that should be a category, right? For sure. So I guess staying on this topic of working with agencies, I don't know why, it really sounds like a fascinating strategy to me to get consistent work. Can you, I guess, maybe describe some of the workflows or the things that people need to be familiar with in order to fit in at an agency that might not be the case if you're just on your own? Like how does that, how does getting work and turning in work and just the whole process change when you're kind of working adjacent to a larger body as opposed to just running things solo?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of times you don't have a lot of say during the design phase because you're coming in after the design is already done and they need to find a developer. Now, some of my longer term agency clients will kind of show me, hey, this is where we're headed. Is this possible? What do you think? But still, I'm kind of behind the scenes. They're located somewhere else in an office together, and I'm, here in Nashville by myself. So that is a challenge. Sure. And, you see a lot of articles about how, design and development should be an agile process and not siloed by themselves. But I kind of enjoy it because I find it a good challenge, and I can give pushback to my clients where I can say, this isn't really, this 50 megabyte video loading on a splash page is not really a good idea. But usually they're really good about that because they are professionals themselves. So basically they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, we've got these 6 different designs that need to be, on a WordPress site. We need WooCommerce, and we need this, and this functionality. And I give them an estimate and a start date. And once I get started, they're really good about leaving me alone to work. And I'll build something out on like a test server that has kind of my generic name is development-client-server.com so that they can show it to their clients. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So that their clients don't know that they're subcontracting to me.
That's nice. And do you find the agencies really appreciate those types of touches throughout the process?
Some don't care. Some are super upfront, and some will even have me talk to their own clients if they're like a smaller, more digital agency where everybody,
everybody's remote. Everybody's
Then they don't care. But if they're like a, physical agency, like I have a client in Memphis who likes to, kind of hide the fact that I subcontract for them. And that's totally okay with me. I don't mind, taking my name off the work or anything else.
Cool. So besides pay, and besides the ability to, I guess, kind of offload some of the client-facing stuff, what are some of the other benefits that you found from this arrangement?
Repeat business. I get to know the people, versus having one client in and then going out and then, because most, mom and pop businesses, you're going to do their website maybe once every 5 years, so you kind of work with them and then never see them again. So I love building relationships with people. I love, getting to know their personalities, joking around, almost like they're coworkers without the baggage of having to, yeah,
Actually be
without
coworkers.
having to see and deal with them every day. But I
Yeah.
mean, I've got clients who will send me animated GIFs and, silly stuff, and we'll joke around. And I had a client call just, I think it was last week, where we spent 15 minutes talking about the project and an hour just goofing off talking about other things.
Was it billable? That's yeah.
No, that one wasn't. But I kind of view that client as almost like a friend, you know.
Yeah, sure.
So
No, totally. And that's one of the awesome things about having that repeat, repeat business is you get to build those kind of relationships because, work is more than just like getting assignments and knocking out tasks. I mean, it's still your life, right? That's one of the things that I think I talk about with a lot of the guests on the show is, for them, it's, the community that they've been able to build around either the products or the tools that they work with and how it kind of fixes the problem of being that isolated freelancer that no one ever gets to talk to, or you never get to like experience other human contact. So, but for you, instead of doing just, instead of like community work, which you do as well, I've seen you're talking at conferences, you're visiting places, you're doing stuff online, but it's probably pretty cool that you get, sort of reoccurring coworkers that are not in this way. That's
yeah,
pretty
it's
cool.
it's really nice because as much of a introvert as I can be, it does get lonely here sometimes. And I've
Oh,
I've kind of
absolutely.
battled that by trying to go out. Last week, I attended an event apart Nashville, which was phenomenal. Um, but I do tend to kind of we have a pretty big tech community here, and I have to admit that I kind of don't go out because once I'm done working, I'm tired. I want to get in bed and
Oh,
not
yeah.
leave.
Yeah, there's a podcasting meetup here in Columbus that I love going to, but it's like, man, at the end of the night, after I've already like either been recording and editing all day or just writing all day, I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to go do, 2 hours or 3 hours of a podcast meetup, but it's fun. And when I can do it, I really enjoy it. Um, I want to circle back around to the
Mhm.
money aspect real quick. You mentioned earlier that for you, you're able to get much higher rate as a freelancer than as a staffed employee at an agency. I think some people really struggle to get to that place. I think typically what happens is I know if you're going by the book, you're supposed to be getting paid more as a freelancer because you have to be accounting for things, like health insurance and benefits and stuff like that you would normally be getting. So your rates should be higher, but that's not really. I think it's kind of become hard to negotiate those types of rates. What allowed you to negotiate a rate that was so much higher than it would have been if you were on staff somewhere? And is that
Sure.
repeatable?
I think the biggest thing is that, 99% of my clients are not in Nashville. So I don't have to charge Nashville rates. I have had a
Sure.
few clients here and they have tried to talk me down, but I am, very strict on my rates. I don't discount unless they're a nonprofit and I'm really interested in working with them, or they have something to do with yarn or knitting, because that's my hobby. I do not discount my rates. And some clients
Gotcha.
will walk from that, and other clients will be like, wow, she must be that confident in her work. We'll go ahead and hire her. Another
Hmm.
issue I've seen is that freelancers in general tend to undervalue their work. I have seen people charge, $15 an hour, which is, when you factor in the amount of admin time you have and things like that, you're working for
Yeah.
less than minimum wage.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was just getting ready to say there's a movement right now for $15 an hour to be the minimum wage. So if you're doing something that's highly technical or highly specialized, you should be well above, well above that.
So part of it is confidence. Part of it is the type of clients you look for. There will obviously be
Mm,
clients who will only pay $15 an hour, but that doesn't mean you have to take on that work. When
yeah.
I first started out, I did start out at the lower end. I started out at like, I don't know, $32 an hour. And then I kind of started playing around. There was one part where I charged 3 different rates, almost kind of like, A/B testing. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
was
to
just
see,
gonna,
I'm getting more clients at this rate or less clients at that rate. Because they say, if you get 100% of your clients, you're charging too low, and if you're not getting any clients,
like
yeah,
100% of your bids.
you're charging way too low. And if you're not getting any,
Sure.
obviously you're charging way too high for the market you're going for. So you either need to adjust that or look in a different market. So a lot of my agencies are in New York City or California where they're used to paying a higher rate. So, when I tell them my rates, they don't freak out. Another secret is I don't tell anybody my hourly rate unless it's for small revisions or things like that. I charge them a flat rate.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I do it based on a scope so that obviously if the scope changes, I can add on and I don't get, messed over in hours. But if I charge, $2,000, well, that's not even my minimum price. But let's say I charge $2,000, but then, finish it in only 10 hours or finish it in 20 hours, then my rate, I make more. If I were to go to a client and say, yeah, I charge $300 an hour, I would never get any work. So it's kind of an incentive base for me to not slack off, to be motivated and to get work done as fast as possible, but obviously maintaining that high quality.
That way your hourly rate is basically determined on how quickly you can.
Right, because there's going to be a cap on how you can charge hourly. Like I said, if you go to a client and say, yeah, I charge $300 an hour, they would laugh you out of their office or off the phone. But if you, charge $3,000 and get it done in 10 hours, the client doesn't know if it took you 10 hours or 20 hours. They agree to the price up front. And so they assume you're going to put in the amount of hours it needs to get done.
That makes a lot of sense. Looks like we're coming up on our time limit. And one thing that I like to do to end our shows is what I just call a parting thought. So basically, if there's, as you think back on what we've talked about, we've kind of covered a lot of ground today and we've jumped around a bit. But if there was one thing that you would want to highlight that you think is really valuable for people to take away, what would it be? And kind of maybe just reiterate it for us.
I think it would be definitely the confidence. The amount of confidence you present to a client is really going to determine if you get paid what you want to get paid and if a client is going to listen to you. If you waffle about, the client will never listen when you try to push back, when you try to tell them, no, this thing can't be done or should not be done. You got to really present that confidence. Otherwise, they're just going to be like, well, this is just somebody in their mother's basement and we can pay them $5 an hour and, push them over.
Sure. Well, it sounds like a great parting thought. I think that's really valuable for everybody to take to heart. Amber, again, thank you so much for coming on Divi Nation.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Well, that's all for this episode of Divi Nation. As always, I just want to give another big thank you to our guest, Amber Weinberg, for coming on the show. If you have any questions about the stuff that we talked about in this episode, feel free to leave them in the comments section on the Elegant Themes blog. I'll be sure to make sure Amber is aware that the episode's going live, and I'm confident that she's happy to drop by and answer any questions that she can. Anything that we can't answer between the two of us in the comments section can become the topic of a new episode of Divi Nation or a blog post in the future. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. I look forward to seeing you around the community. And as always, we'll be back next week with another episode of Divi Nation.